You just couldn't reach the opposition with your own much shorter thrusting shields. So provided the phalanx kept level, and it could just literally walk through any opposition, which it did.
By the time Alexander turned 16, Philip controls most of Greece. But when news of each additional triumph reaches Alexander, he shows no pride.
Whenever he heard that Philip had captured some famous city or won an overwhelming victory, Alexander would show no pleasure at the news, but would declare to his friends, "Boys, my father will forestall me in everything. There will be nothing great or spectacular for you and for me to show to the world." Alexander had no desire to inherit a kingdom which offered him riches, luxuries, and the pleasure of the senses. His choice was a life of struggle, of wars, and of unrelenting ambition.
At the ancient Macedonian capital of Aegae, in 339 BC, Alexander spends much time studying the records and accounts of his father's exploits. It is obvious to many that he grows increasingly anxious to engage in battle, and that one day he will lead his own conquests.
On one occasion when Philip is away from Aegae, some ambassadors from Persia arrive. Alexander receives them in his father's place and impresses them greatly with his intelligence, his maturity, and his knowledge of politics. They come away convinced that Philip's reputation for astuteness is nothing compared to the adventurous spirit and dangerous ambitions of his son.
But Philip also continues to have ambition, to control Greece. Standing in his way are his two most formidable opponents, the armies of Thebes and Athens. In particular, a unique group of soldiers has a ferocious reputation. The Sacred Band of Thebes is made up of 150 couples of male lovers who eat together, sleep together, and fight together, never retreating, always fighting to the death. To further challenge Philip, the Thebans and Athenians had been supported with weapons, soldiers, and money from Persia. Considered the world's most powerful nation, the Persian king knows that if Philip completes his conquest of Greece, he has Persia in his sights. Philip's motive is revenge for a generation of Persian meddling in the political affairs of both Greece and Macedon. The Persian rulers would be pleased to see Philip's ambition halted by the troops of Thebes and Athens. The showdown is to occur at a place called Chaeronea in central Greece. Today, a vast sea of cotton fields. A defeat for Philip would mean the end of his conquests. A victory would motivate him to move his army toward Asia. In August 338 BC, the day arrives for the battle at Chaeronea to take place. Alexander is 18. Philip decides it is time for his son to become a Macedonian commander. He places him in charge of the companion cavalry, a force of 2,000 horsemen who always perform a key strategic role in Philip's battles, attacking the enemy from a flank position. It is with the battle at Chaeronea that the historian Diodorus begins his accounts of Alexander's life.
The armies deployed at dawn, and the king stationed his son Alexander, young in age, but noted for his valor and swiftness of action, on one wing, placing beside him his most seasoned generals, while he himself, at the head of picked men, exercised the command over the other. Individual units were stationed where the occasion required. On the other side, dividing the line according to nationality, the Athenians assigned one wing to the Thebans and kept command of the others themselves.
I am standing on the site of the Battle of Chaeronea. King Philip begins the battle by sending his Macedonian phalanx forward. They smash into the Athenian left wing. suddenly, the signal to retreat is given. Now, for a massed phalanx of infantry to move backwards, keeping formation, is an almost impossible achievement, only made possible because these are the finest infantry troops in the world. The Athenians and their allies now move forwards and left across the battlefield towards the apparently retreating Macedonians. But the Thebans, the more disciplined troops, stay where they are, which turns out to be a mistake, because between the Thebans and the allies, a gap opens up. And that gap is seen by Alexander. He's waiting with the cavalry. When he sees that gap, he charges forward, smashes through it. He encircles the Thebans and is able to attack the allies in their flank. At the same time, the Macedonian phalanx now stops and starts to advance. They steamroller through the Athenians, cut them down. 2,000 of them surrender. The Thebans are not so lucky. Completely surrounded by Alexander and his cavalry, they are killed almost to a man.
Following the bloody battle in August 338 BC, the fields of Chaeronea are filled with carnage. Philip, with the aid of his son, achieves his goal of controlling Greece.
The sacred band of Thebes is buried here, underneath the statue of a lion. The Athenian dead were cremated. The Battle of Chaeronea did two things. On a personal level, it proved Alexander to be an efficient and courageous commander of what was probably the finest cavalry force the world has ever seen. Politically, it established Philip's control over Athens and most of the Greek city-states. He could afford to be generous. He offered peace and the release of all prisoners. His terms were accepted. Alexander himself was sent with an honor guard to Athens, bearing the ashes of the Athenian dead. But relations between father and son were about to change. Never again would Philip trust Alexander with so important a task.
The Battle of Chaeronea could have been the beginning of a father-son Macedonian dynasty. But the future holds in store a far different fate. One that inspires not mutual respect between Philip and Alexander, but hatred and distrust. By the fall of 338 BC, King Philip II of Macedon controls most of Greece. A decisive victory at Chaeronea, in which Alexander plays a significant role defeating the Athenians, gives Macedonian troops respect for a new father-son leadership team.
By the time Alexander reaches the age of 18, he has proven himself a worthy successor to his father's throne. He naturally assumes that this palace at Aegae will one day be his to rule and to call home. But a series of events alters those expectations, events prompted not by war, but by love.
Within months of his victory at Chaeronea, Philip decides to take another bride. 20-year-old Cleopatra, from an elite Macedonian family, agrees to become his newest bride.
I think it came down to the fact that here he is, a middle-aged man, and he finds himself an appropriate young woman who will make a marriage alliance with a strong Macedonian family, and he went for it. Here we've got a guy who's almost 50 taking up with a woman who is, 30 years his younger. So I'll let you draw the conclusions on that.
Regardless of his reasoning, Philip's decision to wed Cleopatra creates a major rift with Alexander and his mother Olympias. Should the Macedonian Cleopatra give birth to a male child, the boy would take Alexander's place as legitimate heir to Philip's throne. For Alexander's mother is from Epirus, not part of Macedonia.
Alexander, who had been brought up on the Iliad and the flattery of his